Welcome back to another episode of the Sasha Davis podcast. Today I have an interview with Erin, and this conversation is going to light your soul on fire. I loved speaking with Erin. So since 2012, Erin has been the visionary force behind Evolve Yoga and Wellness Center. Mother to 5 children, she answered the call to step into the unknown, which was to bring the yogic way of life to Sioux City. Erin continues to plant seeds of inspiration and creation and has established a community where healers and seekers alike find empowerment on this path of the soul. As an energy medicine practitioner, student of yoga, full Mesa Nusta Mesa carrier, practitioner and educator of the Quero tradition, Erin blends the unique aspects of Andean spirituality with the teachings of yoga and mindfulness in classes where you will journey to your edge to strengthen your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. Erin enjoys any activity that takes her outside, music that makes her body move, good chocolate, good food, and even better whiskey. Erin is my kind of people through and through. Enjoy. Here we are, another podcast interview. Today I have Erin with me. I met Erin. I'm going to do my own little introduction of you, and then I'll have you kind of introduce yourself too. But I think I met you 4 or 5 years ago. I started going to yoga at your studio, and I think I even had some Reiki sessions with you too. And I almost took one of your instructor classes, yoga teacher instructor classes, and I can't remember why I didn't follow through with that, but that's always something that's been on my bucket list. So for our followers here, would you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. So I'm Erin Kuehl. I am the owner of Evolve Yoga and Wellness Center in Sioux City. And I think you're right. It's been like 4 years or so since we first met. Yeah. And all the good stuff. Yoga teacher training, all that. I teach yoga. I try to just bring different tools to people so that they have access to things that will help guide them on the path of living the life they were meant to live. So, we all, So everybody, there's all these different practitioners at Evolve that have all the different, skill sets and tools. And so that's our goal. Put it out there.
So what did you do in your, I'm going to say like previous life, like what did you do before you got into yoga and started your studio?
Well, I was a stay-at-home mom for, 10 years. For 10 years. And before that, I was a site manager for a satellite office of the Boys and Girls Home. There was an alternative school and a day treatment program, and I ran that and then started having babies, and that's where my priority was. And we moved back to Sioux City, and I was an at-home mom my whole life here in Sioux City. Well, not my whole life. I grew up here and then left and came back. But, and then it got to be toward the end of, we were on our last child. I had 5 children, and we knew it was the last one. And I was just starting to think of, well, now what? And I knew I didn't want to go back into human services, but I really like humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel you there.
Right. And so I thought of human relations, and so I was kind of going down that HR path and went back to school for that. So after 5 kids, I spent a lot of time at the Y. So I was really into, that was my reprieve. So I could drop the kids off at the daycare, and I could go spend 2 hours was my max limit for daycare there, and I would eat up every minute of it at the Y every single day. And so as I was going back to school, trying to think of what I wanted to do, physical, getting, back into shape and having that outlet was just a path, and so that's really what I did beforehand. But I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, and I did a P90X video. I did all those videos, and I never did the yoga because I had to kick my ass, you know. I had to work as hard as I could possibly work, and that's not what yoga was going to do. So I never did the yoga part of it, and then finally one day I was just like, fine, it's this whole series. So I did the yoga, and yoga kicked my ass, and so I was hooked. I was determined that I was like, I'm going to master this. And so I did yoga. I never did another P90X video. I almost completely stopped going to the Y. It was just yoga. And that was that.
I love that. That's awesome. No, I can relate to the hardcore workouts because I go back and forth between, it's like one extreme or the other. Like I either am doing yoga like 24/7 or I want to do like CrossFit, kick my ass, can't walk the next day workouts. And yoga will kick your ass in a whole new way. And can you speak on what yoga is a little bit? Because I know that I talked to a few people online and they're like, oh, I can't get into yoga. I'm just not into like the stretching and stuff like that. And I just want to shake people because I thought that yoga was just like, you know, slow movement and stretching too. But really yoga is, to me, more of a lifestyle. Like there's a different embodiment when it comes to doing yoga and slowing down not only the body, but your mind and listening to yourself. Does that make sense?
Right, exactly. And, you know, having started off with that mentality, you know, that's exactly what I thought. That's why I refused to do that video. But it wasn't only that my body did not have physical access to the postures. You know, I couldn't physically put my body in that, but I could bike and I could run and I could lift and I could do all these other things. I was strong and whatnot, but you know, I couldn't twist my torso in some of those positions. And so that drive just switched for me. I do miss at times I'm like, oh, I need to do cardio or I need to get my heart rate up. And so there's the beautiful thing about yoga right now is there's so many different paths. You know, you have your traditional like Eastern yoga that is mindful and breath focused and all. First of all, I just have to say this though, it's not yoga if you're not having an awareness on your breath. That's the primary factor of yoga. So you can bring as much cardio as you want into it. You could do mountain climbers on your mat. You could do Pilates in yoga. You could do all these weights in yoga, all these different things. But the whole point is that you have a conscious awareness and connection with your breath throughout the entire practice. And that brings you into this deeper state of embodiment. So you can still get all of those things, kick your own ass on your mat, and allow it to be a highly meditative, even spiritual practice, because we're all spiritual beings in our bodies. And I don't think we need to, when we live the lives that we live, how do you find time for an hour-long spiritual practice, an hour-long physical practice, something that works on your emotions, you know, and something that works on your mental capacity? How do you find the time to do all of those things to improve yourself? You know, but you can do all of that in an hour of yoga. Yeah. And so for me, that was it. It was like all of those needs were met in that hour on my mat. And, you know, my practice fluctuates. Some days, today was one of them. When I taught my class this morning, it was like, I was panting, I was sweating. It was like, you know, it was tough. And, but then yesterday it was kind of like, I don't feel like moving. So it was a slow and deep and mindful practice. But, you know, if people can just come to their mat and experience just a little bit of it, I think that it's so amazingly transformative. You know, you can find your outlet there.
Yeah. And there's something spiritual about attending a class and being in the presence of a yoga instructor and having like the the full experience. I mean, I still do yoga at home, obviously, especially now
Right.
with all the COVID going on. But I can honestly say that I didn't experience yoga until I went to a class. And I think you were my very first yoga class that I had ever gone to. You were Shauna, maybe was the teacher. Anyways, it was your studio. And
Yeah.
after that, it was like like a switch turned on in my brain. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, and I think you had said something, one of you had said something about like, leave your ego at the door. And that really hit me because it's coming into it as like a non-judgmental and like what you need in that moment. If you quiet your mind and just focus on your breath, like your intuition, that inner guide just kind of tells you what you need. And I felt so much lighter when I left. I felt like I had a full body workout. I feel like I had like a refreshed mind when I left. It was such an incredible experience. So for you, after doing these like yoga videos at home, like what inspired you to take that next step into like either opening the studio or becoming an instructor, or what did that timeline kind of look like?
It was really pretty fast. It was such, and that feeling that you just mentioned that you experienced, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, what was that? That was fucking awesome. Sorry.
Yes.
I swear a
No,
lot.
you can drop as many F-bombs as you want. It's totally cool.
Okay. Goodness. Okay. So, yeah. And it's that kind of feeling, and that experience happened to me. And like I said, it was like, I didn't want to do anything else. And I just said to my husband, I was like, I think I want to open a yoga studio. Or I didn't say this at that time. I said, I want to be a yoga teacher. And he goes, go for it. And, at that point, I hadn't even been to a yoga class yet. So I went to, right. And, Melissa Estea, was also, she was teaching at, Yoga and More. And so I went to her December series. And when I finished that, I knew I was going to teacher training. And we had 5 kids. This was right after and I had cancer in between there a few times. And we were just really financially struggling. And so all of these things, even attending a class in the studio, was out of my financial reality. But my mother gifted it to me for Christmas. My mother is she's the queen bee. But and then she also gifted me my yoga teacher training as well. So it was, I did my yoga teacher training in February at Lotus House of Yoga, an intensive. So it was a month intensive. And before I even finished that, I was like, I'm going to open a yoga studio. And so the thing for me was, and I think you've experienced this, because we've had conversations. When you left your corporate job, you're like, I'm doing this thing, and you've done it. But the amount of fear that you experience when you leave the security of where you are, is tantamount to the amount of change that you're going to create. So the more fear that you have, the more anxiety you have about leaving your comfort zone to create that change, the more impact that change is going to have. And so there was a whole lot of fear in me and in the unknown. We did not have money to start a yoga studio. And just the way things rolled into place, and people that are willing to say, hey, I support small business, and I'll cut you a break until you can get on your feet. And it's amazing the doors that open when you step out of your comfort zone. It's so incredibly powerful. And so that's one of the most important things for me, is just this message of, it doesn't matter what your dream is. If your dream, there's nothing that is impossible with your dreaming, as long as you're willing to take those steps to manifest that dream,
Absolutely.
And not like it's hard. There wasn't anything hard except overcoming my fear. So,
But that
yeah.
fear in the moment really feels like life or death. Like I remember feeling that, like, I'm not kidding you. Like I thought I was dying, like the day I decided to quit my corporate job, probably the same as when you decided like, hey, I'm going to open a yoga studio. And once you like announce it to the world, you're like, oh shit, like this is really happening. And I know you're a person of integrity, and what you say, you act upon, and kind of same with me. So when I had like spoke it out into the world, it was like, oh shit, what did I just do? Like now I actually have to do this thing. And all the fears come in, and I can't tell you how many times where I was like, no, I can't do it, or I talked myself out of it. But the support that I had around me kind of pushed me in that direction. And you just follow the breadcrumbs, and even though it feels like life or death, like physically feels like life or death, like I remember sweating and pacing and all of the like bullshit stories that my head would make up that never ever happened or people never said, but it tries to keep you safe and stuck. And once you can kind of move through that and put that out into the world, set that intention that like, hey, I'm going to do this thing come hell or high water, opportunities flow to you, like doors start to open that you didn't even know were possible. And so once you can kind of step into who it is you're supposed to be, the universe or God or spirit, whatever you believe in, answers and starts to guide you to that person. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, that's exactly it. You know, that's the law of attraction. That's everything. That's manifesting. And you know, something that's so powerful that you said, that you felt like you were dying, and you know, you were. That was a death. That was a tiny little death. And it's one of the, I think, major struggles with our society today is that we don't accept the tiny little deaths along the way. We're so bent on never getting to the big death that we don't even recognize the tiny little deaths along the way. And then when we recognize those as deaths, like I really felt like I was dying. You were. There was a part of you that was truly dying off so that this new part of you could be born. You know, when we accept those tiny little deaths along the way, then the big death, then we're like, man, the tiny little deaths were awesome. What's going to be the big death? What's on the other side of that? You know,
I love that. I always wondered that. And I like that. I like that analogy. I like that reference. It does. It feels like I was dying, and really, I even went through, and maybe you can agree or relate to this, like a grieving process. Like there's even sometimes where I look back at my quote unquote old life, and part of me like cannot recognize that person, but then other part of me grieves for the simplicity and the ignorance that I had. Like, you know, because once you see things, you can't unsee them. And so sometimes that ignorance is bliss, and I miss it in a sense. Is that weird?
No, not at all. Yeah. God, if I just went back to the unknown, you know, it's such a challenge to awaken.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like you can't stop going forward. But, you know, I mean, and there's beauty in that, but there's depth, and there's struggle, and there's heartbreak, and there's all those little tiny deaths along the way. And I mean, you got to get down and dirty with yourself to keep going down this path. And that's hard. And I think at those times we're like, oh, it was so much easier back then.
I know,
you know?
I say that. I'm like, go ahead.
Yeah, but staying stuck, you know, I mean, that's where disease happens.
Yes.
That's where mental illness happens.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I think that'll lead us nicely into this next segment that I want to talk about, and that is your energy body or your aura, and how you got into energy healing, because you are an energy healing practitioner also, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about that and being stuck, and how that can manifest into your physical reality, the things that you're experiencing or choosing to not acknowledge?
Yeah. So I, you know, the path of yoga, I guess let me start this way. So we're all like, on that journey to being awake is there's so many different paths up the mountain, and we're trying to all get to the peak, right? But there's everyone has their own path. And when you think about these ancient wisdom traditions, like all of the indigenous cultures have an awareness of an energy body, an energetic presence that resides around your physical body. And so through the chakra system, which is of the Indian cosmology and tradition, I became aware of the energy body and the chakra system. But it wasn't until I went to the Andean medicine wheel, which is Andean spirituality, and it's that happened in 2014. I think 2013, 2014, I went through my first series of trainings there, and that is Andean shamanism, to put it in its most basic terms. But they're Andean practices, Andean spirituality, and again, all of these traditions have a deep understanding of how these energy bodies work and in their relationship with the earth. So if you think about, human beings as we came onto this earth and through this path, we were earth-based. We were honoring the feminine nature of the earth, honoring the cycles of the seasons, and planting and honoring and traditions, and even the things that we celebrate now, these holidays and whatnot, all come from those pagan traditions of honoring the earth and having this very matriarchal relationship with the earth, this very reciprocal, this giving and this receiving, this honoring. And so the further we've progressed into this age of where we are, the more distant we've become and the more disconnected we've become. And we've forgotten about our energy bodies and using the earth to cleanse and clear that. So in our relationship with the earth, those offerings, those honorings, those traditions, everything that Easter, Christmas, all the solstices, everything, those were all met with great honor and tradition. So we're so extremely disconnected. We only think that what we have here is physical, right here, right now, and that nothing outside of this physical body exists because we can't see it. And, the Andean path is all about the maintenance of the energy body. And so I have really, in the past year and a half in my yoga classes, started each class with an energy body cleanse. And it's so incredibly simple. This is like when I talked about those tools that we give out. This is one of the most simple, basic tools that anybody can do anytime. And it's along those lines of whatever it is that you're carrying and just releasing it, like writing a letter about something traumatic and then burning it in the fire. Those
that's my
sorts of
favorite
things.
thing to do.
Exactly. So incredibly powerful. Now my next suggestion would be to take it a step further. Unwind it from your physical body. Because when we hold on to those traumas, those wounds, those things, they are stored out in our energy body. And when we don't deal with them, they just start to make their way in. So they're making their way in and making their way into our physical body. And so they can get our attention and say, hey, I'm here. I'm right here in your knee, or I'm in your hip. Here's that thing that you didn't step into when you were supposed to, and here it's manifesting in your knee. Unwind that energetically. It requires that we have a connection with our body to begin with, and like through the practice of yoga and guided with your breath, you start to create that connection. So you start to recognize where those patterns, those wounds, those things are stored physically. And maybe there's a story behind it. Maybe there isn't. You don't need to know it. But can you even just unwind it, pull it out with a stick, blow into that stick your heaviness, burn the stick in the fire. It's the simplest thing. These are practices I teach my kids. You know, they're stomping around, they're angry. I'm like, and we have a lot of fires in our backyards. I'm like, get a stick. Everybody get a stick and blow the heaviness of your day into the stick. Burn it in the fire. You know, you're dealing with a situation at, and my teacher taught me this with her daughter. Her daughter was she was across the country at a relative's house. And there was something that happened where she just got, you know, she got triggered. She was really upset. She was away from her mom. She was about 10 years old. So she's talking to her mom on the phone. And Celia said, take a bunch of toilet paper and roll it up and blow into it. Blow all your frustration into that toilet paper, you know, blow it in there, even cry into it if you need to, whatever it is, just get that out of your physical body and then flush it down the toilet and release it and let it go. You know, so we pull the energy out of our physical body and we release it in some form. So there's so much more. This is an endless topic for me. I could go on and on.
No, I love
but, you
this.
know, it's just about becoming aware that we have an energy body around us. And, you know, you mentioned the aura, and that aura, you know, it's our job to clean it and to clear it. Guided meditation, just a conscious release. One of the meditations I do at the beginning of or mindfulness practices at the beginning of each of my classes, I draw everyone's awareness into their 3 places of power within, in the belly, in the heart, and in the mind. And we bring our awareness up. We connect with that consciousness that is beyond us, that energy, that benevolence, and we bring it down as we exhale. And as we exhale, it just showers over us, cleanses us, clings onto anything that's heavy, stuck, and we release it down in this grand offering down into the earth. And then as we inhale, we bring up that earth energy, fill up all those spaces that we just cleansed and cleared with earth energy, and that energy moves through us up to the cosmos in an offering up to the spirit realm. And so this way, we're like a conduit between the worlds. You know, every breath is cleansing and releasing and filling you back up. So simple.
I feel calmer just listening to you explain this to me. And I know that this is why I was so attracted to your studio and what you put out into the world. It's very calming. It's very, I don't even have words for it, but talking about the aura and cleansing it, I know everybody has an aura, everybody has an energy body, and I believe this energy body even extends beyond the physical body, like 3 to 6 feet, or something like that. And you can pick up other people's energies by simply being in their presence. And, you know, if you walk into a room and you can feel somebody, and maybe this is just part of like the empath in me, or maybe other people can relate. But, you know, if you walk into a room and everybody's angry or everybody's anxious, or people are trying to project things onto you, that energy can become stuck in your energy body, in your aura, in your experience. Do you have any tools that you can share with our listeners that may be experiencing something like that, and how they can cleanse themselves from other people's projections and energies?
Right. You know, that's such a good question. So I need to start with this. There's a lot of talk about boundaries and putting up your shield and pull up your protection and all of that kind of stuff. And there's a certain amount of danger in that, because, you know, we don't want to armor up all the time. We need to have boundaries. Everybody needs to have boundaries. Like, here's, you know, and we are sovereign beings, right? Everyone has their own sovereignty. And we have to start to, first of all, just recognize our boundaries, but we don't want to create walls around us. We still want to, you know, we don't want to shut off that empathic ability. We just want to be able to recognize what's yours stays yours, and what's mine is mine. And so, and that's the simplicity of your boundary. You walk into a place, and this is a typical example, you walk into a family Christmas dinner, and there's going to be some tension or whatever. I don't know. Most families have something, but I don't know. Ours doesn't anymore. It's pretty amazing. But you walk in and, instead of armoring up, or you walk into Walmart, instead of armoring up, just state that intention. May my energy body have a strong boundary, and may what's mine stay mine. I will not accept any energy from anybody else. And so that's a clear boundary without putting up a wall around us. Because the biggest amount of protection that you can have comes from love. It comes from compassion, right? So if we can start to come from a place of compassion as our biggest strength, we can start to see people through those eyes, and we can start to recognize their projections. We can start to recognize their pain and how they're behaving toward us and their anger. And it's met with compassion instead of hit back at a wall. And that just closes us off to them and creates more resentment and more tension, and the dynamic just continues. And the energy it can't soften. So when we can meet people with a space from the heart as our greatest boundary and our greatest level of protection is the amount of love that we can put out there. And this isn't, I mean, there's a certain amount of times when we have to say, I can still have a place of compassion for you and not be around you. You do not need to be in my life anymore because my boundaries say this isn't good for me. I'm out. It doesn't mean that we're this self-sacrificing, sacrificial lamb that we just put ourselves out there for when we love. Love has boundaries too. And we have to love ourselves the most to strengthen those boundaries. We have to know who we are.
Yes, I was going to say, I think it starts with a journey of self. And I know that I started this journey to self-love, or just awareness of who myself is, several years ago. And boundaries to me in another decade would have been shut down, don't show any emotion, be the tough guy, be the tough ass, like nobody's going to penetrate this armor, to now my boundaries are, okay, I can, I come at it from a loving standpoint and saying, okay, I love and respect myself enough to understand where it is that you're coming from, and having I like to call it like a Switzerland energy, like a neutral energy to it, where I'm not becoming reactive to how they are acting towards me. And instead I take the next step to awareness and saying, as they are experiencing their emotions, my brain is processing why they may feel that way, and coming from that compassionate standpoint, like you say, and saying, okay, I can see that they're angry. I can see why they're angry. How can I show them love and compassion in this moment while still loving and respecting myself?
Right. It's so hard.
It is. There's so many components that go. There's so many things that happen in that energy exchange, more or less. It's like you're absorbing what they're saying through your ears. You're absorbing or understanding what they're saying and feeling through their energy and through their physical body too. There's so many ways that people are communicating to us, and their words don't always match their action, and that doesn't always match their energy. And so when you can understand yourself more, you can understand what people are saying more. Because I could sit here and be like, spitting hate back and forth, but my body may show that I'm really sad, and I just don't know how to experience sadness. So it comes off as anger and hate. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. And what's interesting is that's my MO. It's like every single emotion for me in my entire life has been fight and anger. Mm-hmm. And there's still a hefty amount of that lives within inside of me.
I hear you there.
Right. And so it's just a matter of like taking that and really making it a passion. And so, we're living it right now that, with the social injustices that are happening in our world, what happened, over the past couple of days in Minneapolis, those sorts of things, that
Oh
just
my
gets my
God.
blood boiling,
You just mentioning that gives me goosebumps, and oh, yes.
And so I think that, the more we start to know ourselves, we can start and find that compassion within for ourselves. We can take that, because anger is a powerful emotion. So we take that
Mm-hmm.
power and we use it to fuel our passion. So, and I think that's one of the things that has helped me, like create what has been created, is because, it just, all of that energy was fueled into passion, and it was directed in this one avenue, and things just manifested.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I recognize that, and it happens with my family, I'm really solid. I don't get really reactive to people in the public,
Mm-hmm.
or businesses, anything. I don't get really reactive to things. But in my family, in my household, with the people I love the most, boy, it's like, there's a reason that we're all in this dance together with our loved ones. And it's to work on those shadows, to work on those things that trigger us, that make us just crazy, that bring out that anger, that where we're not responsive, we're completely reactive, and we lose our shit,
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I'm just like, wow, what am I really on this path? And then I walk into my home and I'm like, whoa, what have I just done here? And but that's humanity. That's me still learning who I am and what I stand for. That's me still learning what my triggers are, what my shadow issues are, and still learning to find the deepest amount of compassion for myself and my family. And that's the hard part now. So the hard part, 8 years ago, was opening a yoga studio. The hard part now is like really getting down and dirty with myself and my family, secluded here. So,
Especially, yeah.
right.
I can 100% relate to you. My go-to emotion is always anger. It's that fight. It's that tough guy. Like, and I'm a strong advocate for social justice. I feel like there's a lot of injustices that happen in this world, whether it be with race or disability or ability. There's so much that happens in this world that I wish I could just bring awareness to those who turn a blind eye and pretend that it's not happening, because in our immediate reality, we may not experience it. Doesn't mean that it's not happening on a grander scale. So that's a whole nother can of worms that I think that we could go down. But going back to anger, and anger is a highly motivating energy in my personal experience. And so when I feel that anger, instead of letting myself be consumed in just spiraling, I can say like, oh, I hate this or I hate that, and I can stomp around and just be a total asshole. I try to use that anger as fuel to motivate me to do something about it, right? And so sometimes that's what happens in our physical world, is we become so angry about a particular situation that it triggers something within us, inspires us to make that change. This is where people will say, well, I wish somebody would do something about this. And I always have to say, well, you are somebody. If this is something that you're so passionate about, it gets you so fired up, like, do something about it. And that's us learning more about ourselves. And like you, I'm not really reactive out in the world, but in the walls of my own home, it's our comfort zone. We can kind of let all of that armor off that we may, put on when we're out in the world. And our families can trigger us Oh, I lose my shit still to this day. And then I laugh about it later on, even though it's probably not funny. I still have to just laugh at myself. I use laughter as kind of a decompressor. But I still lose my shit. I'm like, why are the dogs breathing? Like, I'm like, why am I really mad about that right now? Like, I'm not kidding you. Like, I have one dog that snores, and it's not bothered me probably in a few months, but there was a time where I'm like, I would just lose my shit. And then if you look at it in a next world, right? Like, she's just breathing. Like, what's really bothering me right now? And it's that opportunity to learn and to grow in that moment and ask myself, what's the deeper problem here? Like, why are you really angry? Like, what do you need to do to release this anger? And I think what you were talking about in the beginning is like writing it down and burning it, or finding a way to release it physically kind of helps with that emotion in your body. Another example, when we were talking about the chakras earlier, and not saying that I'm a doctor and I don't recommend this for anybody, but one thing that I always experienced was I would have a clogged throat chakra. And that I've learned comes with biting your tongue a lot. You know, I'm a very outspoken person, but there's still a lot of things that I don't say because I don't want to offend people. I've gotten a lot better at it in the last few years, especially with like giving myself more love and compassion. I can say things more compassionately and not so much of a, sometimes I come off very offensive. So I try to say it more positive and compassionate, but I still find that I struggle to speak my truth, no matter how hard it may be. And that manifested in the form of like thyroid problems. And when I started to, you know, and I took medication for it, and when I started to take like a deeper dive into really what does this mean, and why is this energy being stuck in my throat, and how can I heal this? I mean, there's lots of things that I did, but that's just a physical example of what can manifest in your body if you choose not to move through that energy. So by not speaking my truth, it manifested physically into thyroid problems, you know?
Girl, that is exactly my story. I have thyroid cancer.
Oh my God,
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that? My daughter's knocking on the door, but anyways, I knew there's so much that you're saying, and I'm like, I feel like we're almost the same person.
Yeah, exactly.
You talk about anger and yoga, these experiences. I am just loving this. So can we talk about that? I mean, are you okay talking about that for a little bit?
Yeah.
Whole story?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was, you know, I think I've always been a really spiritual person. And with my first child, I just dove right back into a form of religion that was that I grew up with. And as I got more and more into that, into just searching for some spiritual platform, I was going deeper and deeper into it, but there was less and less of it that resonated with me. But I was putting on this facade. I was going, you know, every Sunday I would, in this crazy chaotic hour before church, I would make everybody get up and get beautiful and be absolutely perfect. And we would march up to the church, and we would be perfect in, you know, and the perfect family and all of these things. And yet I was falling apart. And there was a part of me that just there was nothing truthful about that. It wasn't resonating in my heart. And some of the mantras and prayers that I recited really resonated with me. Some saints that I prayed to really resonated with me. But there was just this deeper darkness that was kind of like I was just following along, and I wasn't speaking what was true to me. And then I all of a sudden I had throat cancer. I had thyroid cancer. And I honestly, you know, it was probably, how many years was that? 4 or 5 years before I started down the path of yoga. I didn't know what chakras were before I started yoga. I didn't know what chakras were before I went to teacher training. And so in our teacher training, we cleared our chakras.
Yeah.
And so when you lay down, you can you can open your chakras counterclockwise, and you just mindfully, consciously, you're letting you're getting out of your own reality, and you're just clearing, you're pulling out heaviness out of each chakra and releasing it down to the earth. And I got up to my throat chakra and I started pulling, and it was like I was pulling an anaconda out of my throat. My throat was physically sore. It was sore the next day. And so like the first 8 to 10 months after I opened the yoga studio, my everyday theme was speak your truth, speak your truth, speak your truth. And because that's what I was going through. And it was because in that turning into yoga also took me down this path away from the religion that I was involved in. Mm-hmm. And in their eyes, it was not the right way. I was, so it was me opening the yoga studio was a big struggle for me personally to step into speaking my truth. And I honestly believe that if I wouldn't have done that, I would be dead. I would not be alive today. That cancer would have spread, and I would not be here. And so I think to me, it's so incredibly powerful for me to encourage people to, if that's your dream, go fucking do it. Yes. There's no excuse in the world. Lack of money is not an excuse. If you have the ability and spirit planted that seed within you, that is your dharma. Go do it. So that's exactly what happens, is that we shut off these areas of our body, and illness manifests there. And that illness is a story. That illness is a teacher, The thyroid problems, what did they teach you? They teach you that's enough. You hear it and you're like, oh my gosh, that's it. All of a sudden, the whole revelation of knowing that I have this manifested in my throat because I am not speaking my truth. Right. Yep. And it's like you said, it doesn't mean I can go around and tell everybody to, kiss my ass or do these things. It's like,
I thought about it.
Also is combined with, right, exactly. Just a more compassionate way.
It started with saying no to things that I didn't really want to do. I was always like, believe it or not, like I think it comes from like the social justice side of me. Like I always want to like help people. So I always say yes to everything. I'm like, you want help? Like, yes, we'll find a way. And so, or just like having a difference of opinions. I found that I almost went from like one extreme to the other, and maybe you can relate to this. When I was younger, like I had a chip on my shoulder. I gave zero fucks. Like if I didn't like you, I'd be like, get the fuck away from me. And, I'd go to a bar. I'd be the drunkest person there. I'd walk up to the biggest, toughest guy and be like, let's fight, dude. Like you may be 3 times my size, but I'm going to show you what's up. And then all of a sudden,
oh my God, sister.
I know. I'm like, are we the same person?
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. And then like I had kids, and like I started to be like a quote unquote grown up, and like society tells you that like you have to think, act, and behave a certain way. And I fell into that sheep pattern where I was just following the herd. I didn't really, I was just kind of like aimlessly following people, thinking that like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. And so I started to shut off that bold part of me. And then all of a sudden, boom, I have all these thyroid problems. Like my thyroid was like quadruple the size, and they're like, holy, like they thought I had cancer. I had to go through like all of these like ultrasounds and all this stuff. I had to be on like these crazy prescriptions in the beginning. And now I don't even take prescriptions. Like everything's back to like quote unquote normal. And I feel like healing my chakras and my energy body, and really just like stepping into who I am and speaking my truth. And it's still hard. Like I'm sure you can experience this too. There's some things that I'm like, oh, I just need to say this or do this, but I'm just not quite there yet. And like, it and you're aware of it and you're taking steps to it. Doesn't make it any easier. I mean, it gets easier over time, but like moving through these energies and moving through these emotions and these experiences and really just stepping into that love and that light helps heal your physical self too.
Right. It does. That's exactly it. Our job here, our job on this earth is to walk the path of the soul, right? It's to find that path. Gosh, there's so many things that you touched on that I feel like we could talk for like the next 3 hours.
I know.
But it's so true. It's so true. It's all of those things. It's, the things that inhibit us come from this. It comes from fear. It comes from our wounds. It comes from our traumas, our shadows, all of those things. And we're called to go deal with that, to step out of that, and just to create the reality that we want to live in. And I think that, all of those experiences that we have when we're growing up, all the trauma, all the shit we go through, that fighter in us, that fire in us, and all of those things, they all happened for this reason, that to create, for us as adults, and to step into this, to create what it is that we were meant to create, to do what we were meant to be here to do. So that, going into the bar and picking on the biggest guy and being like, hey, let's go outside, let's fight, that fighter in you, that all happened so that you can continue to do these things, that you can reach out, that you can create these connections. It's part of who you are. It's part of who I am, and there's people that resonates with. And so we all like find these people that we resonate with. Like you're doing this amazing thing, just guiding people into discipline and this life path and this life course where they take control. It's like, hey, I'm done doing this shit for everybody else. Doesn't mean I'm not going to be of service to you, but this is my path, and those things that happened when you were 18 or 20 or 22 years old, those happened for this reason here, to give you that fire and that push to be like overcoming obstacles and just, powering through them. And so now instead of a big guy in the bar, it's just another roadblock, and you're like, bring it.
I've done this. Anytime something scary comes up, I'm like, bring it on, motherfucker. Like, I know that sounds terrible, but that's what I say to myself on the inside. I'm like, I may not be drunk, but I'm still going to kick your ass.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Oh, I love
exactly
that.
It.
So before we start to wrap this up, I know we've been talking for almost an hour. I do really feel like after this whole quarantine shit's all done, we're going to have to sit down and just I'm going to have to start going back to your studio again.
Yes.
But what do you want to leave listeners with? I know we've talked about a lot, but like, what's your biggest takeaway for listeners today?
Oh, I think that's just it. I think that a lot of times, and especially now, there's a lot of heaviness out there. There's a lot of heaviness in the world. There's a lot of heaviness that we're carrying. There's heaviness that's coming to the surface because we are literally living in the shadow right now, collectively. Everyone's in the shadow. And so, our job is to just find those tools, find that path that's going to help you kind of take those steps into who you were meant to be. And you said something about sheeple earlier. You just kind of follow along. But at the end of the day, when you're sitting on your couch and you're watching that show or you're watching the news or whatever it is, can you look back on your day and say, I was of service, or I am fulfilled? And if your heart is still longing, there are so many areas that you can venture down to help step in to who you were meant to be, and it's not easy, and it's hard. And, sometimes it's like, teacher training is a perfect example. People will come to teacher training. They're like, I've done it. I'm awake. I'm like, no, honey, you just dipped your big toe in.
No, you're just getting started.
You're in the baby pool, sweetie. Come into the deep end. And that's it. It's like, we've got to go into the deep end. And so it doesn't have to be yoga. It doesn't have to be teacher training. It can be whatever it is. Just go into the deep end. Go into the deep end and just dream the life you want to create, and then go make it happen. Because the tools are out there in the virtual world right now that we live in. This is the beautiful thing about what's happened here, is that now there's this platform that everybody will start to use to get their medicine out into the world, right? So go find your teacher, go find that person who awakens your heart, and start to get those tools and step down that path. That's what it's all about.
I love that. I love how you said, gave people permission to go find their teacher too, because even though the journey to who you are, who you're meant to be, is a journey that you take, nobody else can do that for you. That is something you have to do alone. But you can have support along the path. You can have somebody there saying, no, I know you've fallen off the path. Come this way. Let me show you how. You have to do it, but I can be there with you step by step. And that it is a quote unquote lonely journey, but it doesn't have to be lonely. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Community and the teacher is so important. A guide, just a mentor, someone that you can connect with. And that when you have conversations with that person, your heart's on fire. You know, that person's your teacher. When your heart just goes bam, every word you're speaking is like, yes, yes, yes. It's, you know, that's the kind of community of support that we need to be around. That's going to lift us up, not the community that's going to shame us for falling off. You know, I haven't meditated, or I haven't done this, or I haven't come to my mat for 3 months. I don't give a shit. I still love you. Come back to your mat. You know, it's not, you know, that kind of openness and community is so necessary as we journey down this path. And it is solitary, but guides are important.
Absolutely. Oh. Absolutely. I love how you just gave everybody permission that it's okay to have help on this journey. So thank you for that. Thank you actually for this entire conversation. Like, you were talking about people making your heart on fire. Like, I am on fire right now. I'm like, I fucking love you. You are amazing. I knew that there was a reason that our paths crossed years ago. So I'm excited to see what comes of this. So thank you so much for doing this. How can people?
Oh, it was so fun.
Yeah, I never know how these are gonna go, and so I love just having like a few guidelines. But I loved this conversation. But how can people get a hold of you? How can they learn more?
You can follow me on Instagram. There's 2 accounts. There's Evolve Sioux City, and then there's and that has a lot of the studio stuff, the yoga stuff, and then my personal account. You know, it's a lot of my kids and my family and stuff. But I do more of my Andy and spirituality goes on that page, and a lot more of my you know, the things that I write about go on that page. But this is one of the things that I'm being called into is to start getting my virtual, you know, stuff out there in a more profound way. You can find yoga classes. We're doing all Zoom classes right now. We've got, 11 a week. So I teach at 8:30 in the morning. But if that time doesn't work for you, you can get a recording of the class for later, whenever it works. And you can register at evolvesiouscity.com. When we open up, we'll be downtown. And I am doing a workshop coming up in June. Where is the calendar? It's on my list to announce today or tomorrow. So June 12th, Friday, June 12th, I am doing an energy body hygiene workshop. So I'm going to do an introduction into energy body and what it is, and then how to cleanse and clear your energy body, actual like practices with breath work, how to clear your own chakras, all of those things that we talked about. I'm doing a workshop that Friday night and June 12th.
Oh, I love that. I'll put that link in the show notes too. And I will probably you'll have to send me that link, send me that invite when that's on your website or on social media, because that would be something that I would love to attend to. So thank you so much again.
I'll get that out today and send it to you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, you're so welcome. It was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Sasha Davis podcast. It would mean so much to me if you could take 3 seconds out of your day and leave me an honest review on your podcast app, or take a quick screenshot and share to your social media and tag a friend, letting us know what you enjoyed most about this episode. And as always, for free resources and ways to work with me, head on over to my website, sashadavis.com, or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram at sasha.davis. And I hope you guys have a kick-ass day.